Okay, you are good to start.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the work session for the Cottonwood Heights Planning Commission for this Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. We'll start with our official determination for having our meeting online. This is the determination of the Planning Commission Chair concerning an anchor location. Pursuant to Utah Code annotated 52-4-2074, the undersigned chair of the Cottonwood Heights Planning Commission hereby determines that conducting any meetings of the Planning Commission within 30 days after this date at an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. It is well recognized that a global pandemic currently exists related to the COVID-19 coronavirus, which has the potential to overwhelm Utah's healthcare system. Therefore, due to the state of emergency caused by the global pandemic, I find that conducting a meeting at an anchor location under the current state of public health emergency constitutes a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the location. For those of you who may not have joined us before in this Zoom format, this is our work meeting. We don't typically have any input from the public. You're welcome to be here. If we have any questions for any of the applicants, we will ask you to join us, but ask you not to jump in. That we'll have time for your presentation in the business meeting. So we'll run through our agenda for our business meeting tonight. And Andy, maybe if instead of going in the order we have on the business items, let's save 3.1, which is our first business item, to the bottom of this discussion, at least for the work meeting. And then if we are still waiting for Shane, we'll reevaluate that at the business meeting time, if that sounds good.
Definitely. And before we dive in, Heather, if you can hear, looks like Commissioner Anderson, Lucy Anderson, is in just the attendees list, so she can probably be brought on as a panelist.
Yep, I'll move her over. And I'm gonna change your settings, Andy, so you can make some changes.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everyone for being here. I'll give a brief overview. Can you all see the PDF, the slides? Great. Give a brief overview of the items that we have on the agenda tonight. We'll skip over that first one, the subdivision that was continued from last week. But moving on to the new items, we have a zone map amendment from R18 single family to the RO residential office zone. This property is Fort Union, I think the address we have here, 2751 East Fort Union Boulevard. It's from the overhead. You can see the property just east of 2700 on Fort Union. And then street view, probably familiar with it if you drive past the area. It's been in use as a home office for, I think, 10 or more years. Previously was a travel agency. The owner lived in the house and operated business out of it. Currently, the owner lives in the structure, operates the business as a home office. Home offices are allowed in the R18 zone, which it's currently zoned at. You can just have no more than one non-resident employee. Have to have licenses if you have customers coming, that sort of thing. The request today is to rezone from the R18 zone to the RO residential office zone. This request is consistent with the land use map. So there's no change proposed to the land use map. This is, you'll probably remember, for those of you who've been on the Planning Commission for a while, that east of 2700 East on Fort Union, much of the land use used to be mixed use. And then at the request of the City Council, the land use map was changed to reflect mostly residential office for those with frontage directly onto Fort Union. And then for the corner lots, medium density or or low density residential. So this is consistent with that change that we had a couple years ago. Brief overview of the RO zone. Single family dwelling is the only permitted use. Everything else is conditional use. So if the use of the property changes, it'll have to come back for planning commission approval. I think the applicant is here with us, and so he can verify during the meeting, but from what I remember, I think it's that he's either moving out and just wants to operate the office without it being a home office, in which case he couldn't do that in the R18 zone, or to have him move out and move someone in and then still maintain that as a residential property with office. In both cases, office uses are a conditional use, or mixed residential housing is also a conditional use. So either way, it's something that could be allowed in the future in this zone after going through the appropriate conditional use permit process. But again, with these, we want to just evaluate whether or not the zone is appropriate for the property overall. Any of these uses could be approved at some point in the future on the property. But staff's recommending approval. We don't have any other comments or conditions. It's pretty straightforward. It matches with the general plan. Any questions on this one?
There we go. Sorry about that. My question really relates to, you know, the Fort Union master plan, and especially this area east of 27th East has been sort of a back and forth issue as far as our planning goes. And it seems to me, you know, initially it was all residential, because in reality above 27th East, the majority of the properties are residential. And Fort Union gets much more commercial below 27th East. And then, you know, in 2019, these changes were made that really kind of create this, what I view as pocket zoning along this section of Fort Union. And this falls right in that. And at the moment, the city is, you know, looking at reworking the general plan. And I assume this will be looked at again, because it's been this back and forth, and what's really the right way to approach Fort Union, especially this section of it. So I'm struggling a little bit with this one. It feels
Understood.
like pocket zoning and really encroachment into what is very much a residential area. Those are my comments.
I think that it's good points, and certainly something that we can look at, and I agree, should look at when we do the general plan. So, you know, we'll leave it up to you on how to decide with your recommendation tonight, but I think that's a good comment for going forward.
Yeah, you know, one other thing is I also read the applicant's narrative, you know, and I'm still not clear on what he's trying to do, other than, you know, the only change I could see to, he appears to be able to operate his business just fine the way it's zoned, other than having potentially an issue with bringing in another employee. Am I understanding that right?
Well, it's currently zone R18, so you have to live there to operate your business out of the home.
Right.
So to keep the business without the residential component, or to have someone else who's living there who's not the business owner, either of those would require the zone change.
All right.
But I think you're correct in that the intent is not to redevelop or really drastically change anything at all, other than with this change, then the business owner would no longer be required to live in that home.
Well, but if we made this change, that opens up some other opportunities for the property. There
Correct.
could be changes that would fit just fine if it were zoned that way.
Right.
Yeah.
My view is that whenever the proposed use matches the map, I think there's a presumption that we ought to go ahead and I don't think that this particular applicant is the person who ought to be the test case. And if we're going to move them all back to where they were before, that's wonderful. But I don't think we do that as a gotcha surprise on one particular applicant.
Well, it's where they are now. That's a land use planning document, so nothing's been done. And if Andy were to zoom out on that existing land use, you would see the vast majority of it's residential with these kind of random spots for other zoning designations, and that's pocket zoning, and that's really awkward. You know, and as outside of just the planning language, it's, you know, you're going down a residential street that has this kind of random business. It's pretty impactful on the residential area that surrounds it. So that's why I struggle with it.
I think I concur with where the discussion is headed. I think I join Chris and Bob with the concerns, and we're not impeding his ability to conduct his business as it sits right now. And it's it's definitely aesthetically, it's a different feel when you drive past that. It's kind of like a cement. It's a giant parking lot in front of a kind of a hybrid residential commercial structure. And for a fledgling startup business, I think that works. But he's got other locations, and I think we need to kind of commit to what this area is going to be. And until we fully commit, I'm not a fan of pocket zoning personally. So
my comment on this, so I really don't know if I would consider Fort Union a neighborhood street. A residential street.
Sure, and I think this is, as Commissioner Coots mentioned, probably something to look at going forward. Our staff recommendation is to approve because it is consistent with what's on the plans now. If that's something that should be changed in the future, it's certainly something we'd be happy to look at. Yeah, and we can continue to have that conversation as this goes to the city council as well. I can go ahead and move on to the next one, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andy.
Have another conditional use permit for a martial arts studio. This one is that property at the corner of 2300 East and Fort Union. Many of you probably recognize this as the old Blockbuster. There's also a bicycle shop there more recently. It's a street view of the property so you can refresh your memory. What's being proposed is a karate studio, martial arts studio for children and adults. Their proposed hours are Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and closed Sundays. There's no proposed change to the buildings, just using the existing building, existing site. The parking requirements match up to the requirements. I think we classified this as, I think there's a recreational type land use that was 17 stalls for a building of this size. So no changes required to the parking or building or anything. But I have to remember what type of use we called it, but it requires a conditional use permit in order to change the use from just a standard retail to this kind of studio type use. We have one called commercial recreation. So that was the one that fit best with this martial arts studio. But again, because there's no change to the site or building, it seems like a standard type of business that would fit into the location. No change required to the zoning. We're recommending approval. We don't have any additional conditions Although that's something that you're of course welcome to include if there are other negative impacts that you foresee.
My concern with this is I'd love to see this go into that building. I think that'd be great, but my concern is with the traffic. And when at those times where kids are being dropped off for the karate class and there's a big lineup to get into the building along Fort Union, or people are trying to do something to cut across Fort Union, there's just concerns similar to what happens with Lone Star today, where traffic backs up to up Fort Union. So I don't know what could be done or what, but I just want to express a concern that that could happen. I don't, maybe the owner of the business can say something to those dropping off that you can't line up or you have to park, or I don't know. I mean, I think that needs to be addressed because it's a busy intersection.
Definitely.
You know, maybe the question for the applicant, Lucy, see if this would help help you understand how that might work better, is how many students at one time they're having, or and how their classes are rotating. Maybe that helps us understand.
Yeah, that's good point. Yeah. Okay.
I might add to that, Chris. I'd love to hear from the applicant if they have any creative ideas for ingress and egress that might help Lucy's concern. Lucy's example, I think, is spot on. The stuff that's happened since the pandemic with Lone Star has been really, I've seen some close calls regularly. And this is when people are trying to do the right thing in many cases and just breaking traffic laws, trying to get in and out of there, not trying to hurt each other, but just trying to, people want their fish tacos.
And they're going to want their karate classes. So
Yes.
Do we have the applicant listening in?
Yes, and I think that we've got someone who raised their hand, so we could probably.
If that's the applicant, we'd love to hear kind of how they're rotating their classes in and out and how they expect that to work.
I think so. Let me bring in Gabriel Johnson.
Hello, this is actually Gerald. Are you there?
Welcome. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Yes, we're right now going to have rotations of about 45 to 90 minutes, and we really haven't had too much of a challenge with that. Usually, parents like to sometimes stay, but after they take two classes, they typically would just drop their kids off and probably go over to Beans and Brews and have a coffee. So looking at the drive-in, I'd probably enter through Fort Union and probably exit right there behind the building towards on 2700. That's probably our recommendation.
Joe, how many kids or people do you have in a class at a time?
Our ratio is typically a 10 to 1. So you know, I've got a couple of instructors that can jump in, but usually it's not any more than that. So at any one given time, probably maybe 15 to 20 kids.
Joe, if it made more sense, would you be willing to direct people from the back of the building on that less busy street and then have them exit onto Fort Union from the other side?
Oh, yeah.
Agree with that, Lucy, or not? Is it possible? What I worry about is what we were describing that happens down the street when people are trying to enter from Fort Union.
Yeah, yes, I've observed that myself. Yes.
I think you'd have a problem though if they're going north on 23rd, you know, hugging the street also, because you know if they're going in from 23rd, they'd either be crossing where it's a double line if they're going south, and if they're going north, they'd be out in 23rd. So that might be as big a problem or more because it's around a corner.
That was actually my concern. So you know, having them come in from Fort Union and either pick up the kids and or park, and then exit out behind the building onto 23rd. That was what I felt would be best, so they didn't add to the congestion going down towards the taco stand.
The only reason I bring that up is that the people exiting from Lone Star don't appear to be the problem. It's the people entering into Lone Star from Fort Union that seem to be the problem. And
Correct. And I was just
you're a traffic
anticipating.
guy, Doug, so
Pardon?
Yeah, we can do whichever one you guys feel would be most effective. I don't have a problem either way, but I think getting them off of Fort Union as quick as can would probably be the better solution.
Thank you. So let me just be clear. You have up to 20 students at a time?
We can have as many as 20 kids in a time. Usually it's on our Saturdays.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll let you know if we have any more questions. That's very helpful.
It
Yeah,
is.
and
Thank you.
yeah, we're open to go in any direction you feel comfortable with sending us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and I guess we've got one more if you want to move on. Shane's with us, so we can get back to that other item as well, but maybe while we're at it, just go through that last item we have on the agenda, which is a conditional use approval for a dental laboratory. This is 1828 East Fort Union. See it highlighted on the aerial here. This is just right across the street from where the Union Lofts townhomes are currently being built. You probably see those as you drive along Fort Union. Proposal is, as I said, a dental laboratory. So this is not a standard dental practice, but rather a laboratory where they do imaging, dental implant construction, crown construction, things like that. They are an existing Cottonwood Heights business, just relocating to this building. Proposed hours of operation Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I think they stated in the application, their average is 5 patients per week. So relatively low number of patients there. Same as the last one, no proposed changes to the building or site. This one is in our gateway overlay district. So for new signs and things like that, if they did new paint or anything, would have to go to architectural review. But the current application is just to leave the building as is and use the existing site and building without any alterations. And again, same as the last one, meets the zoning as long as it has a conditional use approval. So we're recommending approval of the project. We didn't have anything to add. Any questions on this one?
Not hearing any, Andy. We can keep rolling.
Okay, well then I will go back to the beginning here and revisit the Roy T subdivision. I think everyone was here last meeting, so you probably familiar and remember the situation. There was a lot that was divided a couple of years ago just by deed without going through the subdivision process. In order to designate these as buildable lots, subdivision has to be approved by the city. So our request now is to officially amend the lot 76 of Stephenson Heights. This amended plat for the Roy T subdivision, creating 2 lots, lot 76A and 76B. This is the revised preliminary plat that was submitted to staff since the last meeting. So there was some question about the numbers being confusing with this 7-foot addition onto the east side. So now you can clearly see everything's been, we've got a distance of 101.47 feet here, 100.06 feet. And the math adds up now for the total distance here. We did verify that these are both just over 100 feet by just over 80 feet. We had the engineers look at it, and our city engineer reviewed everything to make sure the square footage was right. These were rounded off in the other previous submittal, and so those have been corrected for accuracy's sake. But both lots do meet the 8,000 square foot minimum lot size. So that was the request from last time, was to have the city engineer review and confirm. And so we've done that. I feel like it does meet all of the zoning requirements for lots in this zone, R18 single family zone. We're recommending approval with the condition that prior to final plat approval, all subdivision requirements and department's comments must be met in full. So that's kind of a catch-all condition, but just to indicate that this is the preliminary plat approval. We'll be doing technical revisions and ensure that everything meets code to our satisfaction before the final plat is recorded. I know a couple of you have some questions, so I'll leave it here, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And like I said, I think Shane's joined us, so he should be able to answer as well.
Well, I think probably most of us have the same question, which is related to the comment that came in, which seemed like a very reasonable comment that, our code says you must own the property you're subdividing. And this is clearly not owned by the same owner nor consented to by both owners. So where does that leave us?
I think that what the code says, and I'll read this, the preliminary plat shall show all property under the control of the subdivider. And so it doesn't say that the subdivider has to control all of the property, only that the preliminary plat has to show the portion of the property being subdivided that's under that subdivider's control. When this came in, when I became aware of this probably a month or so ago, this is something that was looked at that time. Does a subdivider have to own all of the property that is being subdivided? And I could find nothing in our code or in the state code that requires that. It's certainly something that I think can be taken into consideration by the Planning Commission. There are, in a plat amendment process, there are options for the Planning Commission to consider what consents have been given and what consents haven't been given by affected people. But I think that ultimately the attorney letter that was received correctly cited the code provisions, but I suggest that it's not so clear that the legal conclusion drawn from those code provisions is correct, because again, the language says the plat, meaning the preliminary plat, shall show all property under the control of the subdivider. It does not say the preliminary plat shall show that all of the property being subdivided is under control of the subdivider. So that is the issue. It isn't as clear cut as I would wish. I expressed in the last meeting my dismay that this thing ever got this far. I am not pleased that the applicant and predecessor apparently did something that I think most anybody knows is out of order. But ultimately, I come down to the fact that if this had been done properly and come before the Planning Commission, the two lots are conforming, and I suspect this would have sailed through with Planning Commission approval. The alternative, looking at the other side of the equation, the folks that seem to be complaining about this are folks who are who have bought the fruit of this subdivision. This, well, maybe I'm wrong, but they bought one of the lots. And I think when they purchased, they knew that they weren't getting both lots and all of the property. So I'm kind of trying to get my mind around the fact around why they are now complaining about this. Are they wanting to get out of their purchase? Are they wanting to have a vacant piece of property next door that the owner of which can never do anything with it because the subdivision can't go through? I don't know. Maybe there's something else that I haven't thought of, but I guess what I'm suggesting is that there are potentially issues on both sides of this equation. And so again, for me, the attorney letter is not entirely persuasive. We looked at this well over a month ago, could not find anything at that time that said that all of the property to be subdivided has to be under control of the applicant. And so that is why it is, that is one of the reasons that it's before you at this point, along with the fact that well, the other issues that I've addressed just now. So if you have questions, let's talk about them. Again, I'm not a fan of this this application. I'm miffed about it, but we're trying to do the best we can with a situation that has, I think, plenty of problems to go around.
Wasn't, or maybe I misunderstood. I thought the big issue was they didn't want to be taken out of the Stephenson Heights HOA and to subdivide. The people that had the vacant lot wanted to be taken out of that and become their own subdivision so they could get around a couple things.
No, that is not going to happen. These lots will still be part of the Stephenson Heights subdivision. They will still be encumbered by the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that are in place on that subdivision. This is just an amendment of that. This is just an amendment of that Stephenson Heights subdivision plat. So I disagree quite strongly that this is going to take them out of the Stephenson Heights subdivision. I disagree that somehow this is going to evaporate the CC&Rs that have encumbered the property for some years.
Well, and I think to that point that Doug raises is that we talked also about renaming the title of the, I'm sorry, I don't know what all the documents are, but what we're looking at now, instead of calling it Roy T subdivision, to call it Stephenson Heights amending lot 76, so that it's clear that it's still Stephenson Heights and not even any kind of hint or inkling towards a new subdivision.
Yeah, and I think we heard from staff last week that whenever a subdivision occurs, why the applicant has to name it so that we can keep it straight. But the caption on this subdivision plat makes it pretty clear to me, at least, that it's just amending one of the lots in the Stephenson Heights subdivision, but it's not excising that lot from that subdivision. To me, that's not even a legal possibility.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Shane, I really appreciate your legwork on this, and I also appreciate the fact that we engaged the engineer on the lines and made sure that we were consistent about how we were drawing this. I think you've made it as clear as can be made given the circumstance, and And I do hope that from a process standpoint, it's clear to everybody that, you know, this is less than ideal, but that predated all of us in terms of process. And I mean, from a process standpoint, I think you've made it very clear. So thanks.
Yeah, I think that just about everybody knows that you don't just get to go and subdivide your property by filing a deed, but that happened here for whatever reason. And then we apparently had somebody who I think probably should have known better, some realtor along the way, who kind of wanted to push through the sale of one of the lots without disclosing what had happened. So I'm a little appalled at that as well. But anyway, we're trying to solve a problem that is not of the city's making in a way that is fair and equitable. And as I try to balance things in my feeble way, that's where I've come down. The commission can make its own decision.
Well, I, for one, would like to hear the backstory on this. Mr. Reese sells his property and then objects to this application. I find that fascinating.
Well, we'll have an open discussion in the business meeting. So keep your questions handy.
Yeah, and I don't think that Mr. Reese sold the property. I think that Mr. Reese was the buyer of the original one, and the owners of the original lot 76 were the ones that carved it off via a deed, and then sold the original parcel less lot 76B to the Reeses, and then have come in for a building permit and found out that this all has to be fixed. So anyway, I'm not sure how that Mr. Reese and Ms. Sundaram are culpable, other than in my mind, I think they had to understand that they weren't getting the whole thing. They weren't getting all of original lot 76 when they bought. They were getting, I assume, the original house and half the property, and the rest of it was being retained by the original owners. So yeah. Anyway, confusing, unfortunate situation all around.
Agreed. Thank you, Shane. It's very helpful to have your perspective on this, and thanks for taking the time. Okay, guys, that's the last on our business items agenda. Do we have any other additional discussion items for our work meeting? I would entertain a motion for the work meeting, and we'll have, if we do that, we'll have about 20 minutes before we come back to the business meeting at 6 p.m.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Anderson, I think. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Our work session is now officially closed. We'll see you again in 20 minutes in the business meeting.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Bye.
Thank you.